Now, of course, when we think of the late 80s and fragrances released right around that time period, we think of Davidoff's Cool Water, we think of Aspen by Coty, we think of Dior's Fahrenheit. Here's another aromatic fougere. This one actually came out in 1989. It's by Alfred Sung, and it's called Sung. I'm excited to give you my thoughts on this fresh, spicy, and clean fragrance, so make sure to stay tuned. Now, before I begin today's episode and I give you my thoughts on Alfred Sung, I'll tell you about the notes, the performance, the longevity, comparisons, so on and so forth. I do want to start the video off first, however, by saying that if you're a fan of fragrance-related content, please do consider supporting the channel by subscribing to it. Hit the bell icon so you can be notified whenever I do upload future videos to the channel. And of course, give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it, or if you took something of value from today's episode. It would really mean a lot to me. So, of course, I purchased this fragrance several years ago from, I think, Marshalls or TJ Maxx or something like that. They were selling it for a really decent price, and I said, you know, I've seen that around, never had the opportunity to smell it, so several years ago I ended up purchasing it. And I swear to you, when this fragrance was first acquired by me, the juice inside was purple. It's actually turned blue throughout the years. I don't know how that happened, if there was some kind of a chemical interaction, or maybe one of the ingredients is responsible for the change in hue, but nevertheless, you take a look at the note breakdown and you can just tell right away that it has a lot of ingredients that were very popular during that time period. There's carnation, there's aldehydes, there's citrus, there's pine tree needles, there's fir, patchouli, oak moss, cedar wood, so on and so forth. So it's a little spicy, it's a little fresh. There's juniper, there's basil, there's artemisia. It's a little astringent and aromatic as well. Nevertheless, I'm excited to give you my thoughts on the smell. Let's go ahead and start things off with a quick look at the presentation first. Now, as soon as you spray this fragrance on, it is fresh and green. Those are the two best adjectives that can be used to describe it: fresh and green. Now, the fresh quality is obviously coming from the citrus. The aldehydes are in there as well. They're quite present, and the aromatic components are really interesting because you have juniper, which gives you a little bit of a woodsy, peppery, astringent smell, and I think it works hand in hand with the cedar wood that's in the base, kind of bridging that gap from top to bottom. You also have the artemisia, which has a tendency of being a little bit sharp at times, and you also have the basil. Now, basil is, I guess, in an olfactory sense, it's related to notes like shiso or cilantro, or, you know, perhaps even thyme or some other aromatic notes. It really depends on how it's combined with other ingredients, if it's going to be very bright or very aromatic or very green and earthy. And I think in this particular fragrance, it has that fresh introduction. There are spices in here, but the aromatic components, I think, come together very nicely. It's funny because I recently finished reviewing Safari by Ralph Lauren, and that had a heavy dose of lavender. So I imagine this fragrance being quite similar to that one, but not as earthy, I would say, more on the aromatic side of things. And of course, this is classified as an aromatic fougere, and I certainly do feel as though the carnation plays a very significant role in this fragrance too. There's also jasmine. Florals are highly synthetic. As a matter of fact, everything in this fragrance is highly synthetic. There are no natural ingredients in this fragrance whatsoever. There are synthetic ingredients derived from natural ingredients, but we're just playing a semantic game at that point. With this fragrance, you do have that aromatic opening. As you give it a chance to dry down, some of the base notes, of course, like the fir and the pine tree needles and the patchouli and some of these other earthy characteristics do come across rather strong. So you give this fragrance 2 or 3 hours to dry down, you're definitely going to smell the oak moss and some of these earthy ingredients and some of the woods as well. But at the same time, they don't have as strong of a presence as something like a Polo Green by Ralph Lauren, which is a Carlos Benaim composition from the late 70s. That one is very earthy, very heavy-handed on the oak moss. And of course, I have a lot of other fragrances in my collection. Like there's a really old school Lacoste fragrance that is very green and earthy. And I also have Paco Rabanne Pour Homme, that's also incredibly earthy. And I even have Versace L'Homme, that is very earthy as well. So when you compare this to those fragrances, this one is not as earthy. It's more on the bright, aromatic, aldehydic, fresh, and slightly floral side of things with a touch of spice. I'm curious at this point in the review, do you have any experience with this fragrance or any classics that were released right around this time period, aside from obviously the obvious ones like Fahrenheit and Cool Water? Drop your comment down below right now. I'm really interested, but I'm glad to see that despite the fact that this has been around for about 34 years now, this fragrance still goes pretty strong. So the longevity on this one is very good. And that's not something that I was able to say about Safari by Ralph Lauren. I think that one, lasts about 4 or 5 hours. This one is actually upwards of 7 or 8 hours. So that's a great thing. Let's go ahead and finish things off with my overall assessment. Now, first up, in terms of the uniqueness and the overall smell, I'm sure that for its time, it was very unique, especially when there was a certain trend back then of having really green and earthy fragrances. And of course, this does have some darker components. There is oak moss and pine tree needles and fir balsam, and there's leather as well. But it's more aromatic, fresh, and spicy than anything else, with the basil and the carnation and all these other ingredients that I mentioned earlier. So I'm sure it did hold a certain level of uniqueness even when it came out. Longevity is pretty good at around 7 or 8 hours, depending on your skin chemistry. In terms of the projection, I think it did really well for the first 45 minutes of application. It radiated within an arm's length, not beyond. It became an elbow's length scent right around hour 5, 5.5, a skin scent right around hour 7 or 8. In terms of the versatility, this one comes across casual, but I can see somebody enjoying it formally as well. Although on a formal scenario, I would look for something with a little bit more citrus, maybe something like a Terre d'Hermès or something like that. I think this one does lean a bit masculine. It might appeal to somebody who's a little bit older just because of the year of its release, and I'm sure it would conjure up a lot of nostalgia for that person. And I think you can actually wear this one any time of the year. I probably wouldn't wear it in the middle of the winter. I would look for something a bit heavier. And in terms of the presentation, well, it went from purple to blue. I don't know how to explain that. Very minimal presentation, but an iconic shape to the bottle and one that is recognizable. My final verdict on this fragrance is, if you like old school fragrances, you're interested in discovering some of the greats from decades past, if you like aromatic, spicy, and fresh fragrances with just a touch of green, check out Alfred sung Hey. Thank you so much for watching today. Thank you so much for joining me on this review. I really hope you enjoyed it, and I hope I gave you the opportunity to learn something new today. If you did, please do consider supporting the channel by subscribing to it. All you got to do is click that red button, and it's absolutely free. It would mean so much to me. Hit the bell icon so you could be notified whenever I do upload these daily videos. And of course, give this video a thumbs up. It would greatly assist with the YouTube algorithm. Thank you again for watching. Love you guys. We'll see you tomorrow. Bye.